Let's now go into check-in with Mike Wagenheim here in our studio, because Mike, the results are one thing. Explain the process, because we need that magic number 61 Knesset seats. For our viewers who aren't familiar with exactly how this whole works and how the coalition is built up, explain that process and explain the process that happens with Israel's president, Rivlin, who then gives the mandate to whoever has the most seats to go ahead and try and form that ruling coalition government.
Yeah, as Owen says, this is just the beginning of the road. So the unofficial results will come out on Wednesday, Israel time, likely in the evening. Those are the unofficial results. There'll be protests lodged against certain votes, so on and so forth, accusations made of fraud. The final votes will be certified on September 24th. At that point, President Reuven Rivlin will begin consultations with all of the party heads, all the heads of the parties that passed the mandatory threshold to make it into the next parliament, and he'll gather their recommendations for prime minister. Some parties will recommend Benjamin Netanyahu, some parties will recommend Benny Gantz, some won't recommend any at all. So Rivlin will then tally the number of seats that those parties represent and take those into account. He may hand the mandate to form a government to the candidate who got the most number of recommendations. He may decide to go a different course. The law says he has broad range and only has to take into account his personal opinion as to who he thinks has the best chance of forming a coalition. So at the end of the day, he'll give the mandate in all likelihood to either Netanyahu or Gantz. That candidate will then have 28 days to negotiate with the other parties and form a majority coalition of 61 seats. If they fail in those 28 days, Rivlin can, but isn't obligated, to grant them a 14-day extension. After 42 days, that's it. There's no more. It then traditionally is turned over to a second candidate. What happened in April is Benjamin Netanyahu pulled the plug after he couldn't get it done. He got the Knesset to dissolve itself. But that won't happen this time because it doesn't look like he has the support to make it happen. So it will, in all likelihood, turn over to a second candidate. They'll have 28 days to form a coalition. If that doesn't happen, there could be a third opportunity handed to somebody. If that doesn't happen, we're back to elections again. A process that could take as short as a few weeks or could take as long as a few months.
All right, Mike, listen, while we have you, I want to talk about some of the information that's coming in right at the bottom of the screen there, and those are the actual election results. We've been talking about these and how they've differed from the exit polls. 25.8% of votes in right now, and these do differ in terms of showing Likud in the lead right now, but it's a gap that we're starting to see narrow a little bit, and we were talking a little bit earlier that a lot of this and a lot of these numbers, it depends on where in Israel the numbers are being tallied in particular.
Yeah, you and I were talking during a break at the top of the hour, and at that point about 18% of the vote had been tallied, and it said that those votes are being tallied in traditional Likud strongholds, cities like Ashkelon, which despite the rocket attacks that they have suffered, have remained largely loyal to Likud and Benjamin Netanyahu. A lot of the votes in Jerusalem have been tallied. Meanwhile, very few in blue and white strongholds, areas like Tel Aviv and the surrounding central region of Israel. Now we're seeing those blue and white areas where voters have an affinity for that centrist party starting to be tallied, and you're seeing the gap close as a result. The thing that stands out right now is the Arab totals are still very, very low. In fact, only about 2% of the vote going to the Arab parties, but that is because their votes are concentrated in very, very small areas of the country where they have 100% or 95% of the vote, but in very concentrated areas, and those areas have yet to be finalized and the votes certified so far, which is the reason that those votes are coming in at such a low total. Everything else, though, you look across the board, the ultra-Orthodox parties, the national religious parties, the left-wing parties to the left of blue and white, those vote totals are pretty much in line not only with what we saw with the exit polls, but what we saw for the polls in the weeks and even months leading up to this September election. They're holding steady right now.
All right, Mike, thank you so much. Our very own Mike Wagenheim.